Life's going to beat you, but you get to choose how you go through it. Gosh, what a great thing to remind people.
Greetings, human beings, and welcome back to Apartment 303, a podcast for community fans. My name is Dave, and alongside my co-host Adam, we are here today for the third entry in hashtag 6 Seasons in a Bracket. We're going to be going through the region that encompasses all of the episodes from seasons 4 through 6, and doing so to help us is a very, very special guest. So without further ado, let us welcome him to the show. All right, we are very fortunate today to be joined by Matt himself from Communities. Most of us know him as the godfather of the community, but I will digress and give Matt the floor here. Matt, tell us about yourself, how you got started into this, what you do here, and how you got all of us into this as well.
Well, for me personally, I started watching right after the press reports about Modern Warfare started. The guy that's the not technical, I should say, Clear, the founder, Mike, with two others, set up the community account back in 2013. Mike started with the pilot, but I started right after Modern Warfare just exploded in everybody's conversations about television. And I'm pretty sure I watched the season 2 opener live, and I think I watched every episode live after that, with the exception of, family events that kept it from happening. But it was always DVR'd, and it was always watched repeatedly. As far as the community account, it was made as a central way for the fans while the show was still on the air to communicate and organize. And it got to about 5,000 followers, a little over 5,000 followers, up until the 10th anniversary. And when we hit the 10th anniversary, we started growing again. And we're currently somewhere around 15.5, so 15,500 followers or so. And it's just a blast to be a part of this system, to be hunting for fans of the show, and it give them a way to connect to the show and all the stuff that they may have missed along the way. We're just thrilled to play a hand in helping connect people. I say we're the conduit. We're not anything special ourselves. We don't do that much, but we are the conduit for other people to have an opportunity to see artwork, to be attached to the artwork that is a podcast that y'all do and the 14 others do. And I am just a happy participant in that.
The range is something I found really impressive because your account covers everything from, interacting with the actors and writers themselves all the way down to, hey, two knuckleheads just decided to start a new podcast about community, of which we clearly already don't have enough. But hey, bring them in, let's connect people from every end of this spectrum. And on a personal note, Adam and I are so grateful. That's how we got into this. Adam had the idea for the podcast. He and Scott and I were trying to kind of find our voice, find our footing, and you reached out to us right away and said, hey, we have a community. If this is the stuff that you guys love, these are the people you should be trying to connect with. So we do want to make sure we give you an extra special thanks for that, and not just for us but for everyone you've brought into the community and connecting at both ends, for sure.
Well, thank you. It is a privilege to help run a fan account. I've been helping since right before the 10th anniversary, so this has been a blast. This is a lot of fun. It is great. I know it sounds weird to say I listen to 15 different podcasts on the same subject every week, in which y'all have episodes, and I can tell you, none of you do it the same way. None of you. And because you're all coming at it from different perspectives, you're not boring and you're not repetitive. I mean, your show is unique. Y'all are much more thematic. I really enjoy that. Other people are crawling through the episodes. I enjoy that. I argue with them with my radio or my speakers, but I and I argue with everything that happens. And there's not an interview that takes place with that Alex does that I don't want to be sitting right there with him. So there's just so much that gets done because of this. And my favorite part about it is we say all the time that every fan gets to be their own version of it. So if you love whatever, love it. And the only way that's possible is if you have different ways to consume it, if you have different ways to enjoy it. And that's what the podcasters collectively do. So I'm all for everybody who wants to do this. Have at it. I'm on your side. And I want to see your version of it.
Oh, I'm just grinning from ear to ear during this whole conversation. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to be part of the community. I think as everyone else who started with a podcast knows, your family and friends get a little tired of hearing you talk about community. So it's great to bring in and outsource new family and friends to talk about what we love so much. And clearly, you couldn't do this with every show, but the fact is there's such a great breadth of work and thought and heart put into community that makes it possible to have 15 unique podcasts a week.
Yeah, I don't know of any other show that has 3, really. I mean, I now, granted, I know very little about other television. When this is what you do, this is kind of all you do. And I'm okay with that because this show has everything. I can watch a horror movie. I can watch a Christmas special. I can watch a musical Christmas special. It can be stop motion. I've got everything I need right here. But I don't know of any show that could carry this much weight as far as fan interaction. There's just nothing like it.
I don't remember which sitcom it was, but I saw a post on Twitter and it was like, Parks and Rec has 6 podcasts devoted just to this show. Name one other show that has that sort of fan base, and you get like immediately 15 community podcasts. Like, all right, hold my beer, hold my special drink, like, LOL. Come on, man.
What a 6?
Like that is cute. That's cute. It's a cute number.
6 was April of last year. We were already at 7. So.
But we all know, it's not just quantity that matters, like you've touched on. The quality of a lot of the offerings here are great, and one of my favorite things, like yours, is the diversity. There are a few different versions of the Rewatch podcast, but even they do it in their own way with different forms of analysis and different approaches. So that is just a great community to be a part of. I hope that we continue to be able to interact with this community from both ends and to continue doing that. Matt, we are getting to the real reason we had you here today. We've wanted to have you on to talk about your Godfather role for some time, but today we are putting you in a little bit more of a compromising position. As you know, we are working our way through hashtag 6 seasons in a bracket, undertaking the quest to establish the all-time best to 4 best episodes out of a bracket of 64 that Adam has painstakingly worked out from IMDb. So when we started this project, we reached out to various guests from the community and said, hey, we're doing this. Would you want to talk about a region? And everyone was like, yeah. I called dibs on season 2 or whatever. And Matt, the hero that we don't deserve, but that we definitely need, texted us back and said, look, I'll do the one that no one else wants to do. And immediately in my brain, I was like, okay, Matt's signing up for the seasons 4 through 6 bracket. But I say that because I feel like overwhelmingly those get the hardest raps, and a lot of the highest heights episodes from the show do come from the first 3 seasons. However, I think that when it comes to the season 4 through 6 bracket, there are a lot of episodes that are a lot closer, and at least for me going through the bracket, it was a lot more difficult to pick winners than it was in the other regions. So without going too much farther, digressing into that, I would like to go ahead and launch straight into this bracket of seasons 4 through 6 of Community. The first matchup, we're starting out with the 1 seed Emotional Consequences of Broadcast Television going up against Her Story of Dance. Matt, you are the guest. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
I think that one is easily chalk. It is Emotional Consequences. The finale is maybe one of the best button episodes for the end of a season that ever existed, and it happens to exist for this show, going against an episode from season 4, which has many people that really like it. I don't think it's in the same mathematical category as far as the beats in it and humor, but I'm definitely chalk on that one.
I will agree with that, Matt. I took a liberty here. I got Her Story of Dance into the big dance here, and I pulled some strings on my own rules about the IMDb rankings just to get a little better representation for season 4.
Season 4, yeah.
Right. And Her Story of Dance is a good episode. I like it a lot. As I rewatch it more, I continue to like it even more. But Emotional Consequences is a juggernaut, and it's not especially close.
Yeah, this is Duke versus whoever got in at the play-in game level. I mean, it's not
exactly.
It's Consequences is Duke of this bracket. Let's say it that way. Yeah, Her Story of Dance is a good episode, but it's not even in my top tier of season 4. I have other options I would have chosen just to plug in here because I know that this is a pick to some degree, and it's a good episode, but it's not. I don't know if it's in the top 16 of these 39 episodes. That's top half episodes. But yeah, no, Emotional Consequences walks this one.
It walks. I'm gonna slightly defend Herstory a little more than you guys. Going into this project, that was kind of my assumption. I've rewatched it a few times, and it's better than I remember it being. There are definitely elements that I really enjoy. We talk a lot on the show about Britta and how sometimes they, paint her as kind of this more incompetent version, and occasionally they let her be a powerful, successful version of the woman Britta wants to be. But I just think Britta is fantastic all the way through this episode. The Sophie B. Hawkins dance as a concept and as an execution are moments of the show that will live with me throughout, always remembering the show. And that's something you can't say for me about a lot of episodes from these 3 seasons. I definitely go Emotional Consequences. It's a clean sweep. But I do think Her Story of Dance is more underrated than you guys do, for sure.
Well, so, if you're making the argument that you finally get to use the term Britta as not a negative, I agree. That's a great beat in that episode. But it's not because she did anything. And that's ultimately the reason I don't like it enough, or don't raise it up. If she solved the problem instead of having Pierce bail her out,
right,
I think it goes better. I think it's easier to say it is Britta having a great moment instead of Britta is being handed a great moment and being rescued. And I don't think of her as being helpless.
I don't think of her as being helpless, but I think in almost every episode they put her all the way one extreme or the other. And I think in this one, they really do a middle ground of having her in that place where her Britta-ness isn't what undermines her. She actually does the right things at most points. Doesn't fail because of the reasons she normally does, but as you point out, does end up getting bailed out. So Emotional Consequences moves on. We have made a habit of talking a little bit more about the episodes that don't move on because obviously we are going to be talking about them again in a second. Here, I'll pitch it to you, Adam, for this next matchup, which should be close. It's an 8 versus a 9. At 8, we have Introduction to Teaching, and at 9, we have Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. Adam, what do you think?
It is close-ish. I am guilty of not giving Advanced Dungeons & Dragons much of a chance because to me it just felt like, hey, let's do another D&D episode. I love David Cross. I really wanted to love the episode. I think that Dean Pelton steals that episode. It's a terrific, if you just focus on the Dean, terrific Dean episode. But for me, it's Intro to Teaching. I really like how can you not like the Nicolas Cage bit? I think it's kind of interesting when Jeff is a teacher and they have a scene dedicated to it. He's talking back to Leonard and leering at a student, and they just touch on that for a moment. They could really have done a whole episode about that. But even still, intro to teaching for me over advanced D&D.
No. There's, for me, look, intro to teaching, number one, I was at one point an associate professor of history. And so the idea of teaching as something you kind of date, maybe go back out with them again, that line that Jeff uses about,
Right, yeah.
That just always made me cringe. And look, it's a funny gag, but Nicolas Cage noises in the subtitle, which is exactly what it says,
Oh my gosh.
is a funny bit, but I just didn't enjoy it as much. Dan Harmon does not like professions, from what I can tell, and so every profession is a bit of a joke, and so making fun of teaching in the episode after he's coming back, and the point of teaching, the point of being a teacher and being a good teacher is to help make Greendale better. But then the teachers don't want to teach, and what they do is not really teaching, and it's not even on subject. I mean, I've always bristled at that. So it may be a personal bias, but I hug my father, and that whole bit where the dean's cutting off strips of his shirt to make this work. I just think it's funny. I know a lot of people are not happy with the finale to it, but I did like this really, simple idea that part of how people, once you're an adult and you've grown up with people and you've got all these past sins, sometimes it's enough just to have a reason to interact. And even if it's kind of forced. And so that idea that they're going to continue playing on their own and have to work together, that's an actual positive thing. It doesn't resolve who gets to spend time with the grandkid. It doesn't resolve those things. But the reality is most of life is Jim Belushi. It just fits in the place that it's there. And it's kind of a placeholder, and you grow over it over time to some degree. So I my personal choice would be advanced D&D over intro to teaching.
Man, that guy's taking.
All right, Dave, which one of us are you going to give an A-?
So I will tell Matt, he hasn't heard the other interviews because they haven't been released yet. I have, despite my best interests, and because Adam and I haven't compared going into, I have found myself more often than not siding against Adam. And like I said, I'm trying to stay true to myself and my opinions and not let those sorts of statistical things sway me. But in this instance, I'm going to side with Adam. I like points you raised about the concept of advanced D&D. The one thing I had written down that is my favorite part of the episode is the Dean Jeff play, those characters. I definitely agree Dean steals the show. One of my favorite Dean episodes. But outside of that part of it, I think that it's inferior to the first Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in every way.
Of course.
I think the setup is inferior. I think Hickey's inferior to Pierce. I think that Neil is inferior to David Cross's character. I think that David Cross could have been used for so many great things in the show, and that's what I feel like they wasted the use of David Cross in the show in that episode. So I do enjoy it, like I said, especially with the Dean stealing the show. I have a real soft spot for intro to teaching. Months ago, this was something I talked to Adam about when we were discussing season openers, because I wasn't a big fan of Repilot, and I've always kind of felt like season 5, episode 2, Intro to Teaching, was really the more genuine pilot for season 5. And I do really enjoy the Nicolas Cage aspect. I love Professor Garrity. I love how all that comes to fruition. I love that it's an homage to Who's the Boss. But I also like that, like I said, unlike the pilot, it does actually make Jeff start dealing with the teacher logistically, not just emotionally or in his head. And all of this is only triple underscored by the bias that 2 episodes ago we were very fortunate to have Darsan Solomon on, who played Dave in that episode. And so he was able to share some of the behind-the-scenes stuff with us from that episode, and it was one I loved beforehand. It is now one that I am very, very connected to. So I'm gonna side with Adam here, and we're gonna go intro to teaching on to the next round. Before we go further down the bracket, though, while we're still on the topic, let's talk about the second round matchup of emotional consequences now going up against intro to teaching.
Consequences is still going to wallop whatever was in this category, so I'm perfectly fine with that idea that consequences beats intro to teaching. It would have beaten advanced Dungeons and Dragons too. So I think your result is still the same.
Yep, no dissent here. It's one of those ones, if you're filling out a basketball bracket, you don't worry if your team didn't make it because you only had them going one game there.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to transition outward instead of downward first, because I highly suspected that. I also had emotional consequences in my next round, so we don't have to live or die on my intro to teaching disagreement, because we all have emotional consequences as winning the next round, regardless of which matchup that would be. So let's keep moving down the bracket now and get into the famous upset bracket. Hasn't necessarily played out for community, but normally does in, college basketball. But here we have the 5 seed app development and condiments going up against the 12 seed cork-based networking. Adam, what do you think about this matchup?
I have a lot of thoughts about this matchup. And so app development and condiments is Meow Meow Beans. And I just tweeted about it the other day, actually, because I was so excited to realize that Jen Kirkman was in it, and she's fantastic, and I love her.
There's very strong, many good cameos in that episode.
Oh, yeah. I love the concept. Very good, from top down, it seems great. Like I said, it's got Jen Kirkman in it. Brian Posehn's in it as well. But it kind of doesn't work for me on the whole, to be perfectly honest. I don't like how they pit Jeff and Shirley against each other in kind of this predictable way that also just gets solved in 2 seconds later on in the episode. I respect it more than I enjoy the episode. So for me, it is cork-based networking.
I would definitely pick advanced development and condiments over it, because it is, number one, the first big homage episode sans Troy that works. It is a year and a half before Black Mirror does it. So they've nailed this thing before. So just from an outside standpoint, I think it would be a winner in this category. I still think that they sure do love some apples, ends up still being funny for reasons I honestly cannot explain. But I got to tell you, cork-based networking never was that funny to me. Hickey as a character is an excellent idea, having somebody who's incredibly grounded to reality. But I think they went too hard, and so you end up with, as Annie, going around and trying to solve this problem, and then we get to run into all these great guest characters, including the first appearance of who would be Frankie Dart, Paget Brewster. But it's not terribly funny. It's more of a lesson. And it's nice to see them go through it. And of course, you do get in cork-based networking, you do get the notice that Troy has probably shipwrecked. But
right.
But app development ultimately is better because it is this idea of, nobody votes down somebody on their birthday, and it's his birthday for 2 weeks. Chang walks with a limp because his foot fell asleep, and he's using those little hand crutches things. I don't know what to call them, but he's using those by the end, and nothing's actually happened to them. And what it reminds me of is everything you see on social media. Whatever problem has happened that gets you notoriety becomes your core of how you market yourself for those people that do that. And that stuff felt so real watching. This idea that some simple thing you've turned into some reason to be a martyr, and now it's become the definition of how you are seen by others. That fits so much into how social media works that I just love the idea and the idea how they were poking fun of this entire approach. So for me, it's app development.
Yeah, I'm gonna go app development here as well.
Oh, I should have put mustard on my face. Dang.
You should have, and I'm glad that you started there. I know we've already brought up the Brita thing, and that's a weird way to start talking about it, but I do think that Britta wins this episode to the largest degree, certainly more than they ever let Britta win an episode. There's so much going on in here. Looking back, I just remember it as the Meow Meow Beans episode, which was fine, but rewatching it, I mean, not only is there the social commentary, the prescient, just look at how society and social interactions are potentially going to evolve and problems that come out of it. We've already talked about all of the great cameos in it. I do like Kugler even in that episode. David and Bixel are great. And then you guys mentioned the Jeff and Shirley dynamic and quarrel, which wasn't my favorite part of the episode, but I liked how they resolved it differently. And I think it was Kevin who mentioned, Shirley and Jeff don't get, throughout the course of the series, a lot of one-on-one time, much less one-on-one stories. And I thought compared to their other main narrative, the foosball episode, that they actually did a different treatment this time. And it showed possibly an evolution in their relationship, if not, at least that they were in a place to end that in a different place. And Cork-Baked Networking never super hit for me. I love the effort and lengths that Britta goes to try to spoil things for Abed. I don't know why. I think that's a terrible person. I think that's not a good use of Britta being a good person. But it is a bit that I enjoy and I love, and it pays off at the end so well. But the Hickey, the Annie, the red tape thing, I do think they had a chance there to set up a relationship and a dynamic with Hickey and Annie going forward that could have been something, and instead kind of just was this thing and never else. So
if they had 22 episodes, this would work better.
Right.
They would have had more room. They needed more time to develop Hickey.
But that was just another relationship that never got really developed or addressed again. So
yeah,
I'm gonna go app dev here. Let's get down to. Let me make sure. I've tried here. I've practiced basic intergluteal numismatics, the number 4 seed, versus the number 13 seed VCR maintenance. I think I kicked it to Adam first last time. I'm starting to lose track. Matt, do you want to go first here?
Yeah. I really enjoyed Brie Larson in the 2 and 1 minute parts that she was in on the show. I think this was a fun episode, a chance to have Spencer from Harmontown to come in and play Britta's brother. But there's no comparison for what basic intergluteal pneumonistics means. It is a David Fincher themed episode. They changed the color of everything. They have the guy that sang the song Brick. Why am I blanking on his name?
Ben Folds.
Yeah, Ben Folds singing a just ridiculous level of depth this episode, where you have the ass crack bandit become this almost like a killer level, and the way they present it. It's the best one they've done like this since Lupine. I think it's really good. So the ass crack bandit episode, that's the reason it wins. It's too good. It's really well done.
I will echo everything that you've said. Brie Larson was fantastic. If she could have continued to be on the show, that would have been magnificent.
Yes.
Vince Gilligan, creator of Breaking Bad, is also in VCR maintenance, so that works well. I like that, but it's not even close how they turn a throwaway line from intro to poli-sci about the ass crack bandit into a full-on episode that it's what, 22 minutes, 24 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
It feels like a full movie, not in a bad way, but just like you said, in the depth. So yeah, hands down, ACB for me as well.
Yeah, it's a clean sweep. It's ACB for me as well. Although I do want to say about VCR maintenance, the main story, could take it or leave it, pile of bullets. The illegal textbook stuff, could take it or leave it. But one thing that will always be with me from that episode is the Dean Pelton Obama rap where he is, what is that, a payday candy bar?
Yes.
And it gets out of control and he doesn't know what's happening. The Dean has 6 seasons of awesome entrances and great appearances. And I don't care for this episode. 4, it definitely moves on for me. We could not have talked about that episode without reminding everyone about that scene. And in fact, you will find it linked on our YouTube page as one of our favorite bits from the show. So, Ass Crack Bandit moves on. Before we head to the bottom half of the bracket here, let's discuss basic intergluteal numismatics going up against app development and condiments in the second round. Adam, what do you think?
Well, I think based on the fact that I didn't have app developments getting out of the first round, I take basic. It's a tough one to say. Basic intergluteal numismatics for me again wins. It's just seeing Troy play a victim is just so funny. Donald Glover does it so well. Anytime he cries is magic on the screen, and this is certainly no exception to that. I also enjoy how Starburns at the end of the episode mimics Dave, for his true fans, and just cracks me up every single time. I could watch it right now after just mentioning it, and I would laugh just as hard.
I don't disagree at all. I mean, as much as I love app development for all that it means and how well it's done, Ass Crack Bandit is just really, really good. One of their more perfect homages that they do, where they just embrace the whole thing. I don't have a way of disagreeing with you. I think it's the better of the 2 episodes by far, and it's the best of these 4.
All right, so no need for me to weigh in and disagree there. It sounds like numismatics moves on. Starting with the first matchup, the 6-seed Modern Espionage going up against the 11-seed Heroic Origins. Adam, what do you think?
I am very outspoken about how much I hate the episode Heroic Origins. I hate everything about it, except for the concept. It's such a strong concept, and I love that idea, but I don't think at any point in season 4 was it more evident, hey, we're trying to do this thing and let the concept lead the episode rather than, let good content inform an episode. So for me, it's Modern Espionage, no questions asked, wouldn't think twice about it.
I really like how well they pulled off the episode when you don't have Chevy. So you have an episode you've written, and then you have a character that you solve by just saying, which I wish they did more of in season 4. You solve it by just having a good line about it. So where's Pierce? Pierce is a fixture at Greendale, so he's inevitable if they show up at Greendale. That is a nice way to handle a problem. And they do a really good job with big parts of this. There's some retconning that happens for a magnitude that's, I think, an accident. But I think you're absolutely right. Modern Espionage is maybe one of the more underrated episodes from season 6 because they bring back paintball without tearing up the whole campus, and they include a beautiful Winter Soldier homage scene for the Dean. So the Dean gets to be actively a participant in it. And they get to make this great argument about how Frankie's character is important, how reality is important. Where we can keep being Greendale, but we can be Greendale where people are okay in it, where we're not self-destructing constantly. That we can be ourselves ultimately and not be a destructive force in our own existence. And that's arguably one of the great arguments the community makes about people in life, is that you can be you and be weird. Just don't destroy yourself on a regular basis, in this case every year or 2 years. I mean, it's a really nice little touch on top of it being a fun episode with all the different Batman names. It's just really well done. I agree with you. Modern Espionage clears Heroic Origins.
Yeah, it's a clean sweep for me. Heroic Origins, just too much Chang, like you said, too much retconning, and Espionage is too strong of an episode. So let's take a look at number 3, Cooperative Polygraphy versus number 14, Queer Studies.
One of my favorite moments of season 6 happens in Queer Studies and Advanced Waxing. It has nothing to do with Karate Kid. It is when they're sitting in the dean's office and Frankie's explaining why she is not public about her life. And it makes this beautiful argument that more people should pay attention to, is that when you're public, it has an effect on your life about whatever thing you're public about. And she says, that's why I am not public in any level about this. And then, of course, they start acting like children and looking at each other like, oh, what does this mean? But it's this really beautiful idea that being public has an effect on what choices you make, and it has an effect on how you're seen by other people. And it means that there are people that are going to accept and reject you by default. And that's a weight all by itself. And that's all they were trying to say about it. But there's no comparison to me. Cooperative Polygraphy is easily one of the funnier episodes of season 5. It has the heartbreaking ending. But even when they did the table read, it's the first one they chose. I think they chose it for a multitude of reasons, but it is a perfect episode where you have table revealed stories where they're telling truths where they've been lying to each other. But it's not so terrible, the things that they're saying, that it destroys their friendship, or should. There's room still for them. And so I think it's the more perfectly balanced episode, and it's a really good episode.
Yeah, I would like to chime in as well. Advanced Queer Studies does some things really well that I enjoy. The bit where Elroy discovers that they're into terabytes now, just as someone who enjoys computing, that's just so funny.
Yes.
And he plays it perfectly. That's great. I really like the Karate Kid interpretation of Mr. Miyagi being the main character. I love that. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it does fall well short of cooperative polygraphy. And you touched on it already here, Matt. I liked the episode when it aired originally.
Yeah.
And I love the episode after the table read. It's one that really benefited from Pedro's inability to get through the script without breaking up, laughing hysterically.
And we got to hear the original version of it. So, I mean, it added a depth to it you don't get from other episodes because of it, because there's different terms they use, there's different language. You don't get shut up wench, which was gorgeous and perfect in the recorded version. You get a different version, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, I think it's an excellent episode, period. And it was going to clobber just about anything it ran into. But it's definitely going to beat Core Studies in Advanced Waxing.
We shall see. I agree. It's a clean sweep on cooperative. Although I will say that it's probably a weekly basis. I get the gauging cover of Jolene crossing through my head. And if for no other reason. But yeah, Modern Espionage, the winner that we just chose over Heroic Origins, will face Polygraphy in the second round, which we just chose over Queer Studies. So that's the next matchup.
Yeah, cooperative polygraphy for me beats Modern Espionage. It's, and it's tough to say. You mentioned being biased earlier, Dave. This is a bias for me too, just because, and I just watched cooperative polygraphy a night or two ago, and I laughed just as hard when Pedro breaks as anybody else, or at any other time when I had seen it. So for me, that's just, it's perfect. It's hilarious. It's, again, Chevy left under less than great circumstances, and for the writers and Dan and everyone to give him a send-off like this, it's really heartfelt. It's great. And, they didn't eviscerate him like when Isaac Hayes left South Park and they just tore Chef to shreds. They went the exact opposite way. And for that, I love cooperative polygraphy.
I have no disagreement with that. It's cooperative polygraphy is, if you're making a list of episodes ultimately for somebody to watch, it's going to be there. Modern Espionage is a lot of fun, but it's still your third or fourth paintball episode if you're going to show somebody an episode. Cooperative polygraphy is top tier, and I definitely think it would. For me, it trounces Modern Espionage.
All right, let's head down to this last bottom part here of our first round, where we've got our 7 seed Wedding Videography going up against number 10 seed Basic Sandwich. Adam, what say you?
So for this one is a case of the penultimate episode from season 6, Wedding Videography, and Basic Sandwich is the finale of season 5. I would like to point out that just by cosmic happenstance, both of these episodes feature a strong shh bit. So that was kind of interesting that worked out. For me, Basic Sandwich is not a good episode. I don't like it. It has moments of merit, and I don't know, just as I hear Annie and Abed specifically talking, like they're using dialogue to speak to each other about the current situation, but it's also very clearly referencing the show. And I don't know, maybe it's just too bittersweet for me to hear them talk about how this show might be ending, and all of the drama kind of clouds the episode for me. I don't love Borchert's, yeah, that whole thing for me was a little far-fetched. But I will say, the return of Duncan and every line he says in that episode is pure gold. Not the kind that can, run computer circuitry, though.
No.
So for me, it's Wedding Videography.
I 100% agree. Wedding Videography has some crying, hard, funny moments, particularly provided to us by Elroy Potashny. As he describes encouraging white people, that is just some of the... Keith David can do anything, and it's nice to see them give him something where he can, just dominate what's going on. Like, you feel like a superhero. I mean, it's such a good little... You feel he actually feels that way, and then he's singing about somebody's pants, that he's wearing them, and that's being successful. It's just so funny. And Basic Sandwich, it's nice for what they're attempting to do, but when that episode airs, there is this weight that's on it, where Dan's basically daring NBC to cancel him before the 6th season. And I think that's exactly what 513 is doing. I think Basic Sandwich is Dan saying, we've been talking about 6 seasons of the movie. You brought us back for 5. It would be stupid not to go to the 6 from a marketing standpoint. And he basically dared them to do it, and they did it. And that's the part about it, that there's a bitterness in season 5. Dan can't stop putting into season 5.
Yeah.
There's less of it in 6, but there's a bitterness in season 5. And I think that ultimately weighs this down. I do like... John back was great. Having Duncan say things, that was great, having him back. And that little bit on the end about all the other shows was a nice little meta touch.
Absolutely.
But Wedding Videography is insanely funny about how they can be toxic in environments, but they also can be useful. And that's their reoccurring theme that goes throughout it. Once they're a group that doesn't really separate, that idea that they can both be a problem and also be a solution. They just have to trust each other to do it. And it gave Chang a chance to do it. That's still, I mean, I know that's not one of his favorite moments. I know he's happy about it, but that's one of my favorite Chang moments. It's so well done. It's nice idea that you can say that to anybody. Look, life's going to beat you, but you get to choose how you go through it. Gosh, what a great thing to remind people. And it was really nice. I really enjoyed that one. So Wedding Videography over Basic Sandwich for me.
So it sounds like that definitely moves into the second round. I will say that I definitely enjoyed Basic Sandwich. Sounds like much more than either of you. Wedding Videography, in my opinion, is the single worst episode of Community. I say that with all due seriousness, which I realize is why you're laughing, but I'm not going to discuss that here. In the future, I think we are going to do an entire episode of our show, or at least a segment of our show, dedicated to why Wedding Videography is the worst episode of the show and the one I can most live without. However, that will be tabled. You guys have agreed that it moves on into the second round over Basic Sandwich. So for now, we will move on to our last first round matchup, which is number 2, Geothermal Escapism, going up against number 15, Basic Human Anatomy.
I will go Geothermal Escapism all day, all the time against most other episodes. It's one of my favorite episodes, even though Troy's leaving. They handle it really well. I can't really think about it without cooperative polygraphy. So you combine the two. I watch them together most of the time. This beautiful idea that you're going to miss your friend so much that the world is caught on fire, and then you find a way to live afterwards. We all have things we lose like that, and I think geothermal escapism is this beautiful, laid out story. I can barely remember Basic Human Anatomy. I mean, I really like those two, having Troy and Abed do a Freaky Friday, and I love that Jim Rash wrote it, and I love Jim Rash's role in it.
How about Leonard being valedictorian?
Leonard is valedictorian because he takes pass-fail classes. I mean, I like it. I like that idea fine. I just never wanted Shirley to be competing with Annie like that. I wanted more Shirley storylines, but this seemed like a stretch to get there. And even though I really love how the dean comes in at the end and saying, when I had Jeff in my body, and he keeps saying that phrase over and over. I mean, it's a funny little bit. But geothermal is, it's the big blowout episode for the end of Troy on the show, and it's just too good.
Yeah, geothermal escapism is, I think, probably the all-time most sentimental episode for me, and each time I rewatch it, I start crying sooner and longer because you just care so much about the characters, in Troy in particular, and how great of a person he's become. The charm of Human Anatomy was, like you said, that Jim Rash wrote it, and the dean committed to a fake bit knowingly, and the rationale for Troy and Abed, that's not a bad idea. I like when they reverse the handshake once they've switched bodies. So there's definitely some nice touches along the way, but nowhere close to geothermal escapism, which moves on from me.
Yeah, it's a clean sweep for geothermal, which now pits it in its second round matchup against wedding videography. So what do you guys think, geothermal versus videography?
I think I'm going to continue on the same trend here with geothermal escapism. And you mentioned in the episode in our podcast here, a couple episodes where you liked Britta's role. I actually really like Britta in this role here as well. She saves the day by creating a fake way to clone Abed, and she gets to be the hero, and she saves the day, and it's not Jeff, and she plunges him off of a chair earlier in the episode. So I like that aspect as well. You can see Troy grappling the whole way through of, is it okay for me to let go or not? Should I do this or not? I'm the only one who kind of understands Abed, and he's wrestling with that the whole way through, and ends up, getting on a ship with LeVar Burton and never coming back. So for me, geothermal escapism.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I do think it's one of those episodes. This show has probably 20 episodes that are easily somebody's number one, and there's not a lot of people that can disagree with them. And I think geothermal ends up being in that category, where wedding videography is funny. It has some nice little moments. Geothermal is, it's on somebody's list. It's in somebody's top 10, almost top 10. So I think geothermal's the winner.
And I did forget, in defense of wedding videography, Frankie continuing to define codependence is really funny. Yeah. And that's, for me, that episode was the first time I realized how much I like Frankie as a character. She is very, very well utilized in that episode, but certainly not enough to D3.
Yeah.
So we're down to just a few matchups here before we get to the end of this bracket for seasons 4 through 6. Let's hop back up to the top. Got a real barn burner here. Emotional Consequences going up against Numismatics. What do you guys think?
I'll go. I think the weight of it, the finale still wins. As much as I love that episode, as much as I love the Ass Crack Bandit episode, the finale, I remember when I watched it the month it dropped, and I watched it every day for the rest of the month. I had it memorized at one point. It may not be the greatest episode of all Community episodes, but I do think it is one of the best of the last 3 seasons, and I think it's even better than a gorgeous, well-constructed David Fincher homage in Ass Crack Bandit.
when I think you hit on it right there for me, Matt. An homage versus an original creative episode, and Emotional Consequences wins out for me here too. So much is going on, and it's so meta in all of the right ways that it's the episode I've watched more than any other episode of the entire series, because I always pick up on something new, always a different perspective, and it's so well done and it's so thoughtful and cynical, yes, but again, in a lot of kind of profound ways, especially relating to, Jeff trying to move on and assess his role within Greendale once everyone leaves.
All right, so facing off, we've got one final matchup before we get to the
Fearsome
winner
foursome.
who will face Emotional Consequences here for this bracket, and that is Cooperative Polygraphy going up against Geothermal Escapism. Another tough one.
Yeah, there may not be a more challenging one to pick for me. I go with Cooperative Polygraphy just because we still, boy, it's real hard. This one's honestly a coin flip for me. They're both just incredible, heartfelt, wonderful, well-written episodes. Genuinely, either one of these is one of the all-time greats. So I'll say Cooperative Polygraphy, just going with my gut. I couldn't, defend that tooth and nail, and whichever way you side on this one, I agree with you.
I think ultimately, and I love them both, but I watch them as a single episode most of the time. I don't think about them separately. And I think the beats in Cooperative Calligraphy are more consistent. But if you're talking about an episode that just absolutely hurts, where you feel it deeper, it's Geothermal. So I would go opposite. I would take Geothermal versus Cooperative Polygraphy, even though I think Polygraphy is probably slightly better written, better the language and the communication they have. But Geothermal just hits the emotional beat a little better, and I'll take that over Polygraphy.
I'm always inclined to go for the underdog, but my feelings on this matchup were a lot closer to Adam's. I could have gone either way, so I think we can both side with you here and go chalk.
Yeah, we'll swing the vote.
Yeah, like we're not going to have harder questions going forward. But yeah,
right.
I'll
so
take it.
Here we are. It's all come down to this. I will tell you that in the other brackets we've recorded so far, we have not had a 1 versus 2 matchup yet, but here we find ourselves. So, last matchup of the show, guys, Emotional Consequences going up against Geothermal Escapism. Who wins? Which episode is the best out of this entire bracket?
If it's me, it's Emotional Consequences. It is still one of the most, Geothermal is a beautiful episode and great episode. And it's not as much as homage as some of the other ones are. But Emotional Consequences allows us to see, much like Remedial Chaos Theory, allows us to see alternatives in a different way. And then have Jeff struggle with alternatives that actually make sense and work. And he can't make any of them work where he gets to keep his friends. And that has always been this basic idea of growing older and the consequences of growing older. I love what that episode ultimately says about being able to be okay afterwards when change is inevitable. So as much as I love Geothermal, Emotional Consequences of Broadcast Television is still one of the perennial great episodes, and I love it.
100% agreed on everything that you've said there, Matt. And, thinking about it within the context of Community is a terrific episode. The way that it forces you to be a little unsettled with Jeff as the main character midway through that episode, that's, a very realistic thing that happens in real life. Yep. And everything works. Shirley comes back and gives one of my all-time favorite lines when she's describing her punchline. It's her setup that's so placeholder to the punchline. Oh my gosh. That is just incredible. And then to consider it within the series finales of any sitcom ever, I think this goes toe to toe with anything that you can think of. I think it is that good, that clever, and that indicative of, hey, this is what makes this show great.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's Newhart and Cheers level finales. I think MASH finales is really long, but I mean, Newhart was a great hook ending. Cheers was a touching ending. I think Emotional Consequences does everything, and I really ultimately enjoyed it. People love, like, as a reminder for the younger generation, Bob Newhart's show ends where the rest of the town gets bought, basically turned into a golf course, and then he gets hit in the head with a golf club, and he wakes up and he's beside his wife Suzanne Plachette of the Bob Newhart show from the 70s, and that's the switcheroo that happens. The rest of the episode is not as good as that last moment. In Cheers, the last line is basically we're closed, and the audience member, there's a stand-in audience member, basically the person walking down like they're coming to the bar, where he tells them they're closed and they walk away. That's the end of Cheers. Those are two great finales. I will still watch Emotional Consequences 10 times before I watch those two, and those two are pinnacle episodes as far as finales go. So I think there's no real argument here. I think Emotional Consequences is just too good.
But thank you so much for your time and for contributing not just to this show, but everything you do for the community at large, Matt. You are always welcome here. You are always a friend of the show, and we hope to see you very soon.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Matt.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
All right. Well, there you go. That does it for the seasons 4 through 6 regional bracket. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Matt, thank you for coming on to help us sort through this bracket. I know it wasn't necessarily the easiest or the most popular, but I really enjoyed getting a chance to go through it with you. So hopefully other people did as well, and hopefully people will continue to follow the work you guys are doing on Twitter at Communities, as well as all of your other endeavors that you may be currently or involved in sometime in the near future. As always, Apartment 303 can be found wherever you get your podcasts. For Adam and Matt, this is Dave signing off. We will see you in a week in the next episode of Apartment 303.